with a slide presentation I put together for you guys to just learn about what I'm doing and my process. So again, Brandy Williams, thank you for having me. And we'll just blast through the slide presentation. So I started this out with wanting to make sure that you understood the importance of is, because that is what I had to do, the reason for which something is done. I made a conscious effort to figure out what I was supposed to do when starting my business and with working with the public, what type of concepts I wanted to implement into my work and my business plan. In doing that, I learned to understand that my work is part of this larger, interconnected, larger landscape that supports plants, animals, humans, and community development. Even though I have I have my degrees and my contractor's license, but that was necessary for me to do my work. But what was most important is what was at the heart. I am an outdoor living specialist. My background is in human services. That is, my master's degree is in human services executive leadership. But what I did is I took that information and figured out I can communicate the importance of nature and that into a business. So that is what I did. In understanding what my purpose was, I had to learn what the purpose of pollinators was. And I say pollinators because that was part of my mission when making my business plan and understanding what type of gardens I wanted to create. My goal was to work with pollinators because human interaction has contributed to habitat loss. And I understood that and still understand that. And I just wanted to take that, moment and create something effective and powerful. So they're beautiful. My work is communicating with the community about the beauty of pollinators, their responsibility for our nutrition through the process of animal pollination, and also the work that they do in our ecosystem. Let's meet the pollinators. Whenever I communicate with a client or just anyone, or even by me being here today, many people just really don't have just the basic understanding of what pollinators are. So bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, bats, beetles, moths, flies, wasps, and that is not a comprehensive list, but just a general list for people to understand, these fascinating creatures, these beautiful creatures, and what they do in our environment and how we can work to protect them. They're important because they're responsible for most of the fruits and vegetables that we eat. I'm sure many of you know this already, especially by you working or learning in your field. If you enjoy coffee or chocolate, you want to thank the pollinators for that. Apples, apricots, avocados, bananas, grapefruit, the list goes on. But pollinators are they contribute to the development, the growth of the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And let's see, let me minimize this. Okay. So in creating gardens and planning gardens, I said, okay, I'm understanding this pollinator habitat thing, this whole deal about that. But what about regenerative gardens and sustainable gardens, the importance of that? They decrease habitat loss, enhance beauty of our home gardens and our landscape, plants, drought appropriate plants, providing an opportunity for us to partner with nature and also to attract and buddy up with beneficial insects in addition to the pollinators. And regenerative gardens and sustainable gardens, when we're thinking about that approach to design and installation, covering the soil is extremely important. There's life in the soil, and we want to make sure that we are designing our landscapes so we can cover the soil so we can have healthy soil to produce healthy plants. Regenerative gardens, sustainable gardens, when we're thinking about that, we also want to consider water conservation and water conservation as a California lifestyle. When we think about water conservation, we're thinking about the different plant selections. Are we using succulents, California native plants, since we're in California, California friendly plants. And we always want to push the California native plants because those are the plants that provide for our local wildlife. Also, water, slow the runoff of water in the landscape, store it for future use, spreading the water in the gardens with permeable surfaces, and also sinking it into the ground and using that organic mulch. Now, this slide here, actually all the slides that you're going to see come from my garden. So this is what we were talking about. So we'll get into that in a few more slides. But as you see here, we have the swale, we have succulent plants, and also the rain barrel for water conservation. We live in a Mediterranean climate. So California's coastal region, we don't live in a dry, arid environment. A lot of people do believe that just because we are here on the coast, it is a desert. No, we are in a Mediterranean climate where we have hot, dry summers and cool winter months with periods of rain. The climate is much different than a dry and arid desert. So we want to be conscious of that when we choose our plants, determining the plant palette for our designs. Let's see, incorporating rain gutters, the different types of mulch that we're using. We want to reduce overspray with drip irrigation, and there are many let's see, brands out there for that are available for us to use with sheet mulching rather than killing the turf with herbicide and those chemicals. And even when we're doing sheet mulching, not all grass or lawns you can use sheet mulching, but that is the first option that I would, consider using. With weed removal, you want to use those least toxic herbicides in the physical and mechanical methods. I use the physical and mechanical methods to maintain my garden and other gardens where I work. And also smart irrigation, right amount of water in the right place at the right time. So if you look on this slide, I have an image of a drawing of a traditional landscape and a sustainable landscape. So the sustainable landscape, you have the rain gutters, you have the mulch, you have that ground cover, perennials, and you have your trees, whereas the top, you still have the tree at the top actually. Top, you see how the rainwater is just, running down the driveway into the street. Versus if you had a landscape where you're designing and installing a landscape with plenty of plants for that water to irrigate the plants for pollinators and wildlife. This is my garden. This is my house. And at the top, you see the traditional landscape. And at the bottom, you see the regenerative landscape, the sustainable landscape. And I'm going to go back. And if you can compare it to this slide, the traditional landscape, sustainable, and then I'm going to flip back. At the bottom, that is where we are now. So Garden Butterfly, South Central Los Angeles, this is what you see. It is full of life. It was designed specifically with pollinators and humans in mind. So these next slides, we're going to talk about plants so you can see. I thought this would be a great opportunity to take a tour through the garden. Now, here we are, about face. This image was taken for the LA Times article that feature garden butterfly. And I communicate this as the dry garden redefined. It is a scrapbook garden. So even when you are thinking about, going into business, or even if you are designing gardens now, I encourage you just to be creative and create a title for yourself and the work that you do. And that is what I did. I'm an artist and I do a lot of scrapbooking, or I did before, I started my business. But in doing that, if you can see, if you're familiar with scrapbooks, you see how this palette, it's just like plants like right next to each other. I just have a way in understanding how to plant plants where they should be placed, and then they'll just look good. It's like this natural chaos, as you can say, kind of just like a scrapbook. It's perfect, but it's imperfect. This garden is a garden for my community. I say that, and I'll give you an example of community service, promoting environmental stewardship and developing a relationship with neighbors. Just on this past Monday, I was just sitting out in the garden. I met two ladies for the first time. They just mentioned how they walk by and they appreciate what they see in the garden. I invited them in. They took a look around the garden, and I communicated to them the importance of pollinators. About 30 minutes later, this is how the spirit works. About 30 minutes later, one of the ladies actually brought back an injured swallowtail butterfly, which is what you see here. And she placed it in the garden, and she just thought, you know what? She saw it under a truck, she said, and she just felt that she should try and give it an opportunity to live. But because of that connection with the community and how the garden is created, there's no fence, just so it can be inviting. Of course, this is my garden and people do respect that, but it does give a sense of community. And when people ask to come in the garden, I walk the garden with them. This picture I wanted to include in the slide because as a small business owner, I'm on my hustle. I work, I read, I study, I network, but I also use my garden as a place to decompress. And this was a picture, I took this little selfie one day last year when I was just sitting in the garden and just happy that I was able to create this space. And I like to, show people, just the possibilities of creating something that you have and just working with what you have. And my garden is less than 1,000 square feet, but it's giving an opportunity for you or your client, or just like an opportunity for me to live the lifestyle that I want to live, which includes sitting in my garden. So now let's get into it. South Central Los Angeles is Garden Butterfly is a certified wildlife habitat. In the beginning, I made a conscious effort to figure out what is it that I was supposed to do. And I wanted to plant with pollinators in mind. I wanted to take it a step further. When I learned about the certification process and anyone can do this, I said, well, of course, this landscape contractor in the community going to get that sign so people can see a certified wildlife habitat. It's certified because it it has nectar plants for energy, and it attracts pollinators. The Garden Butterfly South LA has host plants as a food source for caterpillars, a water source. There is a bird bath and a recirculating water fountain on site. I provide cover and shelter from weather and predators for wildlife with shrubs, fallen logs, and there is a tree that I did plant right on the parkway. It is a place for wildlife to raise their young. And we also include the sustainable practices, which is important with the organic mulch, limiting water use and also using compost when it's necessary. This is Garden Butterflies, South LA, a Southern California sustainable landscape. I'll be using that term. You see here the different the life cycle of a monarch can be completed in this garden. Again, less than 1,000 square feet. We have the native plants for the butterflies. And there's actually a log in my garden that I've experienced carpenter bees going in and out. So they've made a home there. With the pollinators, beneficial insects. So the different types of butterflies, monarch, Gulf fritillary butterflies frequent this garden. Bees, the sweat bees, carpenter bees, leaf-color bees, bumblebees, beneficial insects and spiders, dragonflies, hoverflies, ladybugs, different birds. Hummingbirds are the number one bird that visits this garden. Also the black phoebe, bush tits, and mockingbirds. Oh, let me go back here. So this is a picture of a hoverfly in my garden. I was able to capture this picture in my garden, South Central LA. So Garden Butterflies, South Central LA consists of California native plants. This is a Palmer's Indian mallow. It's a perennial. The size grows from 3 to 8 feet high, 3 to 5 feet wide, and it is in bloom now. Actually, it's a great bloomer. It attracts bees and hoverflies. Here's another picture of the Indian mallow. These next slides will be pictures of plants in the garden. So this is it's in the garden, but as you can see right there on the sidewalk, we have a red buckwheat. It's a perennial California native plant, long bloom time in the summer. The size is about 1 foot high, and it grows 2 to 3 feet wide. What I wanted to do was make sure I incorporated colorful plants that provide for pollinators. And this is a sensory garden because it just satisfies all the senses in one site. It's beautiful with color. So when you're considering your landscapes and your design, really determine what type of designer or landscape architect you want to be. For me, my palette is more naturalistic designs. And with that, again, planting for pollinators in mind, I want to bring in those colorful plants that provide nectar and pollen. This is a California fuchsia, the Calistoga. This plant tends to die back and go dormant in the winter. I included this plant because, of course, it's important to know which plants grow well and bloom, actually which plants bloom throughout the year, wanting to have some sort of bloom at different times of the year so you can provide for those pollinators and the wildlife. So this plant flowers late summer to fall. It's in bloom now, 1.5 feet high to 1.5 feet wide. And there are different varieties of the California fuchsia, but if you are designing a garden wanting to really attract the hummingbirds, California fuchsia is one of the plants that you want to just put high up on your list. See, this is another California fuchsia. It is the Catalina. It's semi-deciduous. It's a host plant and great for hummingbirds. A host plant because it provides for the caterpillars. As you can see, this is a white-lined sphinx moth that is taking advantage of those leaves. California native plants, as you can see, you see the color. There's so much you can do with color using California native plants. So not only are they important and necessary for our environment and our area here in California, but they're beautiful as well. So in this photo, you see the California poppy, which is the state flower. It's a self-seeding annual, flowers February through September. And also you see the Salvia bee's bliss. The next slide, I'll show you that one. Here you go, the Salvia bee's bliss. This is a great ground cover, as you can see it growing in Garden Butterfly, South Central LA. It's a creeping sage, purple flowers in late spring, and it is a magnet for bees. It goes dormant under extreme heat. So now, during this drought, it didn't, it looked like it was doing its thing, but it's starting to, form and fluff out. So the size is 8 to 10 feet wide, and it grows under 1 foot tall. And as you can see, like those naturalistic elements in the landscape with the fallen logs and the tree stumps. I'll say this, look at this picture. You see the tree stump, it would be to your left. Earlier, when you saw me in the garden holding the Hustle mug, I was sitting on that tree stump. This is a picture with the California poppy again, and the jelly bean yellow monkey flower, both California native plants. Here's a heuchera plant. I included this plant because it is a great shade option for you, for your plant. Flowers are really insignificant, but you see a caterpillar taking advantage of the leaves or the blooms on this plant, but it's really the form of the leaves that gives you a ground cover effect when planting them in groups. It's a great shade plant. This is a very important plant too. Well, they're all important, but the California buckwheat. Now, I planted this guy on the parkway. There are 3 plants planted on the parkway. I'm saying that because usually the parkway plants, you kind of have an issue with those, you have dogs walking and people walking, but this one has done really well. My yard is my lab. So I said, let me plant these plants here, see how well they grow, with the dog interaction. And it's done really, really well. This is a keystone plant in the California coastal sage scrub plant community, which is a plant community that South Central Los Angeles falls in, and it supports most specialist caterpillars or bees. Supports the most specialist caterpillars or bees. This is an image of the buckwheat that you just saw, but as you can see, the California native plants, they have these seasonal changes and they look beautiful. They're just stunning. Many people aren't, that it isn't with their taste, but again, knowing what type of landscaper or what type of artist you are, you can present these, so you know what type of client you'll be sitting in front of. And again, mine is more naturalistic, so knowing I will be including California native plants. Now, this is an image of the California native buckwheat in October. Let me go back. This image was taken in July, so you can see the different seasonal changes of California native plants. This is another image in the garden of a bee. I believe this is just a honeybee. I don't think this is a California native bee, but this is in the garden, a bee extracting pollen or nectar from the buckwheat. Here we have a California lilac, the Yankee Point, which I have growing on the parkway. It's a beautiful ground cover flowering winter through early spring. The bees love this plant. And here is a view from the street of the Yankee Point planted on the parkway. This is a California native succulent, Dudleya. So if you are incorporating pots into your designs, knowing what plants do well in pots, and the succulent Dudleya is a really great option for you to use. Here's a mix of California native and California friendly plants. This is an angle. So you see here with the cursor, this is a non-native plant. It is a succulent, Petalanthus bracteatus. This plant can get about 8 to 10 feet tall. And then you also see it on the other side of the landscape here. We have the Indian mallow that I showed earlier that produces the yellow blooms. Here is that the bee's bliss that I showed you earlier. It produces the purple blooms. This is a succulent plant. It is a non-native plant, but it has grown very well with the California native plants. It is the it's a kalanchoe plant, the paddle plant. This is a California native sage plant. And this is a non-native plant. I have it in my next slide. You'll see it is a moonshine yarrow. So I just wanted you to see a few different options of how California native and California friendly plants are growing together in this garden here in South Central Los Angeles. Here's another angle. Actually, on the other side of the garden, you have a California native ground cover manzanita. This is a California sage, Salvia pozzo blue, which produces purple blooms. The manzanita here produces like white or pink color bloom. However, this plant has been growing a few years, but it just has not produced any blooms yet. That's not really important for me in a sense, as it's okay because it just provides that ground cover. So again, a place for pollinators or wildlife to hide, for cover, and also to protect the soil. And then here's another angle of that Petalanthus bracteatus that I showed you earlier. It's just a statement plant, and hummingbirds love the blooms that are produced. However, this is it's not a California native, but it is a California friendly plant. It is non-invasive. Here's an image of a non-native plant, the moonshine yarrow. This one is a well-behaved variety. Now, there are California native yarrow plants, and I do have them. There's a sea of yarrow, actually, to be honest with you, growing in our yard with the intention of it's just a volunteer. So once you plant one, so you really want to be careful of that, the California native, the white yarrow plant, it'll just start popping up everywhere. And it grows underground, rhizomes, and I think it self-seeds. I'm not sure, but just look into that if you aren't already familiar with that plant. I didn't include that in the slide, but there's a sea of yarrow here. It pops up everywhere, but I welcome that. And I also have it planted on the parkway. Let's get back to this. So this will not reseed and it will not spread. So it just stays in a clump form, having to cut it back because it does, once the flowers are spent, it looks doesn't look all that great. But so, I just cut it back and then it'll just grow back the following season. And let's see, it flowers late spring to late summer. And it's perfect for dried arrangements and cut flowers. Growing food in urban small spaces. This, I can't stress how important it is, especially when you're living in a place, such as South Central Los Angeles or any urban community where you have that term food desert. When you incorporate raised garden beds, it provides an opportunity for healthy eating and healthy living. There are opportunities if you have a balcony. So if you're communicating with someone and they don't have the opportunity to grow in the ground, those raised beds or container gardens that you can use for growing your own food. This here we have on the side yard, and also in our backyard, we have herb gardens, container gardens, food gardens. This is another food option that we have. It contains culinary sage, oregano, and rosemary, also chamomile. And what I did was I included this white sage because I just wanted to be creative and provide an opportunity for beneficial insects to be attracted to this garden. And sage, it's actually doing well in this raised garden bed. This is an aerial view of the food gardens, the raised food garden beds that are located here. And I wanted you to see the importance of just going outside. Like, this is not staged. This is the real deal. In the backyard, that is what we do. When friends and family come over, we eat outside. You know, you're picking from the herb gardens, preparing a salad, picking from the herb gardens and incorporating that food. It's fun, and it's just fun, and knowing that you are just being an environmental steward. This is a picture of a bee. There's a lady named Crystal Hickman, and her company is Bee Sip. She came to the garden and identified 7 different native bees. And this is one of the images that she took this picture in the garden. Now we just have a few slides where I'll just show you just some of my designs. I work low volume residential projects. This is an example of my work. Succulent gardens, water-wise, plant smart, using succulents and drought-tolerant perennials. This is another option. So, you know, when you're designing your landscapes or communicating with clients, these are different artistic flair that you can incorporate with succulents. I love succulents are my thing, so I'm always talking about succulents and pollinators. This is another view of garden butterflies, South Central LA, from the sidewalk. And if you see where the lighting is, there's a mix of succulents and California native plants. This is a view of a garden that I designed and actually assisted with the installation in South Central Los Angeles. But again, here, incorporating plants that attract pollinators and creating a space for people to come outside, work, and just be with each other. Here's another image of succulent plants, water conservation. They are perfect for that. This is another design. It is a small space, but I wanted you to see, you know, as a landscape contractor and actually I'm a design contractor focusing on succulent plants. And this is what you see. It's a succulent tapestry garden. Here's another view. And the ground cover here, this is Diamondia. This is a really great water conserving ground cover plant. And this is at installation, so it does grow into a mat if you aren't familiar with that plant. Here we are, another succulent garden, drought tolerant. This is in the beach community. And here we have an example of using the landscape and incorporating pots. A tree was unable, we couldn't plant a tree in this area, but the client wanted something there. So let's plant the tree in a pot, but knowing which trees do grow well in pots are important, or actually are necessary. And that concludes the slide presentation. I wanted just to pound through that. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Brandy. That was amazing. That was like truly amazing.
Oh my
First of
goodness.
all, you're an amazing artist, and the way that you speak your art through landscape design is just fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna have you stop sharing your screen. That way we can go ahead and open it for discussion. And
Okay.
yeah, students, I would love y'all to ask some questions. I know y'all have a lot of questions to ask. I know you all will be starting to develop your concepts for design interventions. And with Brandy's expertise around native species and layering and really being responsive to clients' needs, I felt it was great to have her on today to present her designs, as well as give you all an opportunity to ask questions that you all may be having around building out concepts for landscape interventions. So with that being said, I know Brandy covered a lot of things, so I'll open it up for you all to ask questions that came up during the presentation.
Hi, first I want to say thank you for such a great presentation. I think I learned a lot from it. And what I wanted to ask was, what do you think were the most important or impactful companion planting strategies that you have seen in your design so far, in terms of like pollinators or attracting birds? What do you think were some of the companion planting strategies that were the most effective?
Well, knowing what plants work together is one, and that's a really great question. So just knowing what plants work together, you have to know that, like the different water requirements that, so your plants won't die. In my landscape, if you saw, I had like the manzanita plant and the salvia pozo blue. That plant worked together. I wanted that plant. Oh gosh, those plants grow well together in my landscape. Now, it all depends on where you are. Just because it will grow well here in South Central LA, I have a north facing landscape that may not be necessarily true for, if someone has, or it just all depends on where you are, and also the soil, what type of soil it is. So here it's clay soil. The manzanita grows well. The salvia pozo blue, those grow well, those two grow well together. I also incorporated the Petalanthus bracteatus. I'm a creative person, so I just, just kind of push the meter to see if it will work, and it did. So those three plants, that Petalanthus bracteatus, the manzanita ground cover, oh my gosh, which one? Oh gosh, I just lost my thought about what is the name of that variety manzanita that is, and also the salvia pozo blue. So when trying to find out which plants you want to attract for pollinators, just really do that research with the sun orientation, what type of soil you'll be growing the plants in, and then also what type of pollinators you want to attract.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope that answered your question. It's caramel sir, the manzanita.
On the topic of that and like research, right? Also, well, before I want to ask the question, thank you, amazing project. Like this just how the presentation was just like your garden, right? Just is amazing. Like
Oh, thank you
how
so
your backyard is like your own lab, right?
much.
And I just wanted to ask, like, what resource? I know that there's like Calscape, right? Like, that's a resource about like finding natives, but we actually had a field trip. I'm trying to make this question short. We actually had a field trip, and it focused on like using, well, it focused on like invasive species and how they get impacted native. Noticed that you didn't, well, you used the term California friendly plants. I was
Mhm.
just gonna ask, when creating a planting palette, where do you really find these plants? Like, is it that you're contacting your local nursery, or because there might be some nurseries, they want to just mass produce a plant that can be invasive, right? How do you work on finding your plants is my question.
Okay. So, are you familiar with the Theodore Payne Foundation?
Yes, I'm familiar with that and just Calscape, which I'll put in the chat because like it's really planting native is I
Shout
think
out
a
to Garden
step
Butterfly.
forward.
Oh,
Shout out to Brandy and Garden Butterfly. They have a page on their site. Putting it in the chat now, and it has some really great resources. So thank you so much, Brandy, and your team at Garden Butterfly, because having that resource is really important, and I think it really hits on that question that Stephen was asking. I wanted to make sure I dropped that in the chat, but I definitely want to make sure you have an opportunity to respond as well.
oh yeah. So thank you. But yes, Theodore Payne Foundation, you said you're familiar with it. I'm still just going to just talk about it briefly because that is the #1 choice for California native plants. So if you aren't familiar with their resources, please go. That would be the first place to start. They have resources for what type of plants to use or regarding like the sun orientation. If you want to plant a butterfly garden, they have a list of suggested plants for you to use with planting a butterfly garden. Also a hummingbird, if you want to attract hummingbirds, different types of birds. So many resources on that website. And I think that would be the best place for me to direct you to, is the Theodore Payne Foundation. Also, bewaterwise.com. They have a lot of great resources there too. So if you're just starting out and wanting to get used to designing different landscapes, Be Waterwise. You just have to do some research on, where to go, how to navigate it. But there is a place that will assist you with designing a project. And it is based for homeowners, but you can use it too. So there are so many resources out here now, like the different municipalities are providing some great resources for us for water conservation.
Any other questions?
What plant would you be, or tree?
What was the question?
Just like a fun question, like what plant or tree would you be?
Oh my God. Oh, okay. I'm not sure which tree, but what plant? You know what? I couldn't just answer just one plant. So I would say a salvia, because I just love how it attracts the pollinators, just wanting to attract goodness to me. Let's see, another plant would be the California native, that white yarrow that I was talking about, that just sprouts up, everywhere. But even though it sprouts up everywhere, it just attracts and it gives what the environment needs. So maybe that plant too. A rose, even though it isn't California native, but any rose that smells good, I'm her. I'll take her. And she's pretty. So, women, we want to be pretty and cute. So look, give me a rose. And I don't know. What? I think think about that. Someone else may ask me that question later on. Maybe I'll ask myself that question and include it on my Instagram, because who asked me that question?
That was
My name is Steven. I just like followed you on Instagram.
Oh,
Pretty, yeah. I kind of, this is big, but if you want to text later, I have a project that's like focusing on like connecting like the coast and the Santa Monica Mountains
okay.
and like restoring animals. It's not really focused on pollinators, but yeah. Maybe I could use this time also to like ask another question. You mentioned like using planters,
Mhm.
right, to like feed like urban or just urban areas, right? And even like the term urban, like socially, it's like associated with like low income areas. And working with those low income areas, do you have any like projects? I know that like, you know, there's an income barrier, right? Have you
Yeah.
had any projects or any like thoughts, right, of like breaking that barrier of like income? Because really there's no barrier, like there really isn't a barrier when it comes to like plants, right? The real barrier is just soil, getting the soil, getting the water, and the soil orientation. So I was just gonna ask you like, what are your thoughts, or like have you had any projects?
So what I've done, one, I work with the local school in helping them to establish or reestablish a garden. I worked with the parent center and the garden, and they started a garden club as a result of me working with them. Also, when we're talking about the urban area and barriers, yes, there are many barriers. And even though I live in South Central LA, I was raised in Compton. I live in South Central LA, and I run a for-profit business. So I'm not a nonprofit. People do approach me wanting me to, work with them. What I do is, in my business plan, I just naturally just do community work. My community work is education. So that is what I do. If someone doesn't have the resources to hire me, and they are in the local community, I encourage them to plant those raised beds, giving them that information. What I also would hope to see is more nonprofits, and later on down the line, nonprofit work is something that I'm interested in doing. Now I do run a for-profit business, but if you're interested in opening yourself up to that, running a nonprofit business to where you can, provide those resources and get that support to do designs, for, people who are underprivileged or underserved in the underserved communities. The other thing is, even though we are in an urban community, the regentrification process is here, there are, so opportunities for profit is available to me. But I do understand that we still have, that group of people, I'm from that group of people. So, these are my folks, love my community, but we have to elevate each other and also educate. And I do educate when I can, my resources. So, yeah.
that was a really helpful answer, though. I appreciate you uplifting the education piece. Yep, Stephen putting it in the chat. But also the component of business modeling, right? I can imagine that many of you all will be business owners, and really having a business model that's centered in social justice, environmental justice is really critical in finding a way to have a component in your business plan that does give back. So like Brandy mentioned, the component, the business plan for Garden Butterfly is education, teaching impacted communities how to be empowered to change the landscapes that they live in too, right? the beautiful model of that is Brandy's personal garden. In addition to the consulting and contracting services you offer for landscape design, you've done your own garden. So it models the possibilities, right? And I really admire the way that you're leveraging your commitment to community to make sure that they're educated to do the same. Well, I thank you again so much, Brandy, for joining us today. This has been so enlightening, so inspirational. Your work is so powerful, and I'm sure all of the students learned so much from today's, and we'll be incorporating some of those plants, California natives and California friendly plants, into their landscape interventions that they'll be proposing. They'll have an option to look at a residential option for an intervention, a natural landscape for intervention, and or a contested landscape for an intervention. So again, all the insight that you provided, all will be vital for any of those opportunities that they'll engage in, because they'll all be part of building landscape interventions. And your landscape design models, especially centering pollinators, centering drought tolerant and sustainable features within a landscape, is really beautiful and unmatched, especially with your artistic eye. So
you know what? I am holding back the tears. I promise you, I am. I appreciate it. You know, this is my work, but I'm gifted. I know who I am. And just for you, encourage you, know who you are, be confident in your creativity, learn as much as you can. So when you get out here, you can navigate and, you know, be in control of your situation. But knowledge is key. Education is key. Use that internet, go to the library, open the books and do this, you know, take notes and just, you know, just be confident and learn what your purpose is, discover that. So thank you so much. My heart is in it. And I just thank you. And I want to say, even though I do my landscape, I incorporate California friendly plants and, you know, many of the succulents, but I do push the California native plants. So really work and have the majority of California native plants, and then, you know, opportunities for those other plants, because a lot of clients, they just don't want to go all native. So you work with people, you know, where they are. They don't want to go all native. And if that's within your business model, you know, just be as smart as you can and just figure out, you know, how to make it work.
Any farewell remarks for Brandy as we send her off, students? You could type them in the chat, clap it up, reactions.
I just got one quick question. Has there kind of like a scenario like where you design a garden for a client that wants like some of these certain flowers, but like probably they might have some allergies to like some pollinators, or like maybe they might be allergic to bees or something. So is there like some like method or strategy to kind of like avoid that kind of situation? Or
That is, all these questions are great. That is another great question. So honestly, I haven't been faced with that, but it would just be the alternative, like an alternative plant, if they're allergic, you know, to a certain type of plant, but an alternative plant. So that's where your plant palette, you know, you want an extensive plant palette, and also knowing, you know, the zone, you know, what plants work in that zone. I wanted to say something else. Now, the other thing with me is, you know, I'm naturalistic landscape working with pollinators. So, you know, people pretty much know what they're getting, you know, so that's where I was saying, you know, you really want to know what type of designer you're going to be. So if people know that you are a California native plant specialist or a designer, most of these plants, they produce flowers, blooms. And, you know, especially if you're planting these plants in full sun, with the blooms, they are going to attract those pollinators. So just be mindful of that. But that is a really, really great question. One other thing is, even though people who aren't allergic to bees, many people they're scared of the bee. So this is what I say real quick, y'all. That bee, she's like a confident woman. Give her space. She's not going to bother you. She has a job to do. Just like the bee, she has a job to do. Don't bother her. Give her space. Let her do her job. And she ain't going to bother you. But once you start messing with her and fooling with her, you're going to have a problem. So, just, communicate and understand the world around you and these pollinators and wildlife, and yeah. So there you go.
Thank you.
I see Ron has his hand up. I want to make sure that we answer that question.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm not sure if it was already asked or answered, but what are like some websites that you use to like search plant material for certain like areas?
So the Theodore Payne Foundation, number one, bewaterwise.com is a great website, and the Cowscape. Oh my goodness, Las Politas. Hold on, let me just make sure. Oh, I have it on my website. So if you go to my website, there's a resource page. I believe I'm pronouncing the nursery correctly. It's Las Politas Nursery. So those are websites that I do use.
There's a website too on that on your link that you have on your site, Brandy, which I thought was really cool. I have to do some research. It was saying that it shows where all of the California blooms are happening. And so you can call the number and it'll tell you where you can find the blooms. And you can travel and you'll get like a field of bloomed flowers. And so I'm really looking forward to going on an adventure soon to experience that.
But yeah, California, the theater, the Theodore Payne Foundation, Be Waterwise, and of course the Cowscape, the California the Cowscape. There we go, Cowscape.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And I'm sure the students will be in contact. Definitely network, students. This opportunity, learn more. I appreciate the example Steven shared. Follow Garden Butterfly on social media. Definitely check out the website. Lean into the different resources that are available on that site as well.
And ask questions. I don't care. I ask questions over and over again. I don't know everything, and just ask questions and figure out your specialty, and just know that the field you're in is just very important. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Brandy. I will definitely be reaching out to you again soon. And thank you so much for everything.
Welcome. Thank you, guys. Bye.
It looks like
Thank
Steven
you.
put your Insta. So if you see your numbers go up, don't be surprised.
You guys. Oh. You're welcome. Oh, that's so sweet. Okay.
Getting all of the love. That's so amazing.
Oh my God. See.
Yes.
Okay, I'm about to leave the meeting. I can't take.
We'll definitely see you soon. Thank you again for
Thank
joining us today. This was just really amazing.
Okay.
I'll send you the video as soon as I upload it.
Okay. Bye, guys.
All right, students, I'm super glad that we had the opportunity to share space with Brandy today. That was such an amazing presentation. I mean, so much learning, so much wisdom, so much insight. I hope you all were writing down all of those friendly California options. Those are going to be really critical for your concepts, right? So definitely take advantage of those resources online. I'll make sure that they're posted on Canvas as well, but those resources are very, very helpful, very useful. So definitely take advantage of them. All right, so let's go ahead and get back into the lecture. So these are some of the photos that Brandy was going over. But like Brandy was mentioning, it's really important to, especially when you're dealing with residents, if you're developing residential landscapes, some of you all did the walkthrough of your communities and you saw a lot of those challenges, some lawns where those old European grass filled lawns, right? And so really centering it back into this drought tolerant, water wise garden plants, succulent, drought tolerant perennials, right? And perennials are the ones that really bloom throughout the year. And so you want to definitely take advantage of those opportunities. And then also the sustainability component is low maintenance. So these are some of the examples of Brandy's work. Again, native pollinators. I really like this because it looks like for this client, the bottom right photo shows that there was an existing tree, but Brandy laid down some mulch around the tree, which definitely creates some water capture opportunity there. And then really did some gardening in the far back where you see the above the raised bed gardening for food. And that's a big thing when you're talking about different landscapes and the different challenges and constraints that you have to be mindful of. It's one thing to grow, you know, plants in the soil, trees in the soil, but at the same time, you have a lot of groundwater that's polluted in South LA. So if you're going to be growing gardens, it's important for it to be above bed so that it's not, you know, taking in a lot of the toxins and then being eaten when you're eating the garden, right? And so those are some of the things that you have to be mindful of when you are developing residential gardens or gardens in environments that have polluted soil and or groundwater. So again, this is an example of a tree and how the drought tolerant landscape was built around it. This is really great because similar to how we saw at Ascot Hills, these native species around this tree aren't going to be competing against it as much as, like, let's say an invasive species that doesn't have any competition would. And so this is a beautiful display of layering as well. There's some opportunity for water capture. You have the mulch, you have the native species, as well as a tree, as well as rocks laid out throughout the landscape. So these are some really great sustainability features represented in the landscape. And you also see the permaculture design principles, right? With the pollinator species, you have the water rain garden component where you're doing water capture, which is sustaining the livelihood of these perennials throughout the year. These are sustainability features, permaculture design principles that are making this landscape really sustainable. And another thing that I really liked about what Brandy was speaking to was her intention of creating a naturalistic landscape. Oftentimes, we can lose sight of natural landscapes and try to find like this picturesque view of what a landscape should look like. And I really, really appreciate the naturalistic component to the way that Brandy approaches landscape design. Some more examples of Brandy's work. This was the ground cover. It looks like this is a little after installation, so you can see how it begins to grow over time. So shout out to Garden Butterfly. Did y'all enjoy that? Did y'all
Heck
enjoy
yeah, that was great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I wanted to give you an example of some residential options, as well as the way that that can be scaled, similar to how we read in the reading for water management in LA. Property owners can play a big role in, you know, let's say water management or sustainability, right? And so in the example that we read in that book, a lot of the local families who now were engaging with the local city government were leveraged to build those closed water pipelines on their land. And today we'll be talking about some opportunities more recently, where residents are being used to create, natural, sustainable landscapes similar to the landscapes that Garden Butterfly develops, but also using it for other things like growing food, right? So shout out to Garden Butterfly. One thing I did want to mention before we go on from this, we talked about succulents, and Brandy gave examples of succulents that do well and are friendly to California native species, but we have heard horror stories about succulents and how invasive they can be. And one of the things that I feel was cool to see Brandy incorporate were the containing of the invasive succulents, right? So they're still a beautiful component. They're still a big part of creating drought tolerant landscapes, but in certain instances, you can identify a way to manage, right, how they exist in site. And I think using containers to manage invasive succulents or other invasive species that you, let's say, want to enhance the site with, you can do it by containing them, but just making sure. So another component Brandy brought up was those plants that sprout one time or that spawn new seeds and can, reproduce themselves on the site. So really be mindful of all of those components when you're planting on a site, especially when you're dealing with known invasive species. So yeah, Brandy discussed a lot of these components, so I won't go into detail about this. I want to go ahead and move on to some of the other examples of similar residential uses of sustainable landscapes. So Moonwater Farms is a community garden in Compton, and Brandy's from Compton, so it's really cool to see some synergy there. Moonwater Farms is actually ran by a professor, Kathleen Blackistone. She's a faculty professor at Cal Poly Pomona, but I've met her and worked with her through my work with the Food Policy Council. And so she owns this beautiful space in Compton, and this is a residential lot, right? It's a residential lot that's zoned for residential agriculture, which there aren't a lot of zones like that in the city, but in Compton there is one, and it's been zoned that way for over 100 years. And so this very unique urban component within Compton represents what an urban environment could potentially look like, especially as we scale up the partnerships with residents and homeowners who can use their spaces to, again, introduce more sustainable practices in the landscape, right? And so Moonwater Farms, they do classes, they offer this space to different people to host. They also partner with a lot of community members to give them educational opportunities on farming, plants, native species, and they have animals, right? They have goats there, so they're able to produce clothes, and just, they got a lot of great things going on. Another thing that's really cool about this site is that if you use it, you have to be mindful of zero waste, right? So it's a zero waste site and zero carbon site. So there's certain components that you need to be mindful of if you do want to rent this space. And so it's really interesting how they're incorporating that. And like, let's say there's a space of refrigeration and dishes and things of that nature, but if you use it, you got to clean it up, right? And so there's some really great self-sustainable principles that are being used in this site, not only as it relates to landscape, but also community engagement, community organizing, community sharing. So Moonwater Farms is again an example of resident site being used to increase access to green space, sustainable models of agriculture, as well as community sharing spaces. Another example of resident spaces being used to improve access to green space through landscape is Crop Swap LA. Crop Swap LA is ran by Jemiah Hargan. He is a urban planner who started Crop Swap LA with an opportunity for community members who were growing food to share it and has since grown to be something of a social enterprise, right? Social economic enterprise where they're feeding families with the produce that they are growing. They're partnering with homeowners to use their lawns to grow food. And that food is being bought by different monthly subscribers that, they purchase their food from CropSwap. And so this is a way for one, land to be used in a unique way. Homeowners can use their land to reclaim green space, generate a local economy, and provide healthy food access in food desert communities or communities experiencing food apartheid. So these are some really great examples of resident spaces being repurposed for the healthy food access need, and again, reclaiming green space. Another great example of a community coming together to develop and reclaim green space is Mudtown Farms. This Mudtown Farms is in Watts. It's a project of the Watts Labor Action Community Committee. And I may have that acronym messed up, but Watts Labor Action, yes, Watts Labor Action. Start there and it'll come up. They're a really amazing organization. I've had an opportunity to work with them when I was in grad school, and they also do a lot of projects and programs to address homelessness. They provide workforce development, and on their site, they also have a really amazing art studio. But now, right across the street, they have Mudtown Farms, which is a site where folks can come and rent out plots to grow produce, and it's a community center as well. So it's really exciting to kind of see this actually exist now, because when I was in grad school, they weren't even broken. Well, I think they had just broken ground. They had the architecture design of it, but they had not built anything. So now it's there, it exists, and it's moving the conversation forward as far as reclaiming green space, remediation of toxic soil, and also the need to have more healthy food options through local urban agriculture, right? And so all of these components represent what I feel Garden Butterfly was speaking to in their work, with Brandy representing it so well, is one, centering all of this in the need for the environment as well as the community. And that's super critical for this, but also maximizing investment into this. Stephen, you asked a question about access and whether or not barriers to economic opportunity were interfering, let's say, with the impact of Garden Butterfly. And these other organizations represent similar questions, right? Like they're trying to fill the gap. Kathleen, she's a homeowner, a community member. This is her site. This is her property. This is her site and her business that her and her husband started from retirement, right? After they went retired, they started Moonwater Farms, but this is their home. CropSwap LA, this is a nonprofit organization. They have this really great business model, and they're partnering with residents and working with families to make sure that they have healthy access to food. But again, partnering with homeowners and with a business. Mudtown Farms is a community-based organization who received a lot of resources, government dollars, resources, and so on and so forth, to develop this concept of Mudtown Farms, which is addressing the need of community. So these are three different examples of resident-centered projects that are centered in landscape and addressing environmental justice, food access, and economic opportunity. Any questions? Because I wanted to stop it real quick before we move on. We had a great conversation with Brandy we've been talking a lot in the class and through our readings about all of the considerations you need to make in relation to your design, right? And what are the motivations for those considerations? So especially when we're talking about your vision for your landscape projects, I want us to take time to do a quick icebreaker about considering all the things you're learning, considering now these like examples you're getting from, people in the field. We heard from Professor Stephen Chavez a couple of weeks ago. We went to the Ascot Park field trip and heard from community-based organizations. We heard from the environment itself. With Ascot, we actually walked and listened to the trees and just listened to nature. And we experienced that in real time. And then now we're talking to designers who are developing landscape designs with pollinator components considerations, water capture component considerations. And we've also gotten exposed to some of like, let's say, the policy stuff. So with that being said, what are some of the thoughts you all have for the intervention? Thinking of the projects you've been exposed to, what are some of the interventions that are coming up for you based off of the field trips that you've gone with our class or other classes? What are some interventions that are coming up and what is motivating your, let's say, proposal or leaning towards those interventions? I'm gonna go ahead and start with Linda. Again, the question is, what are some of the landscape interventions you're thinking of based off of the field trips that you've attended either in our class or other classes? And what's motivating your concept build out for that intervention?
The first intervention that came straight to mind was invasive plants, just because I thought of the Ascot Hills field trip. I thought of the black mustard and how they worked with the landscape. So I was thinking of, the first thing that came to mind was using native plants, and like, since we're in California friendly plants like Brandy had said. And yeah.
Nice, thanks for sharing, Linda. And I know Brandy gave some really awesome examples of some California native plants. What is a native plant that you're excited to explore?
I really liked the California buckwheat, the one she said that like changed color seasonally. I really liked how it turned into like a deep like cherry red, black. And I also liked seeing all the ground cover she was showing. Like I can't remember what it was. I think it was the salvia bees bliss. That one was really nice too.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Let's go to you, Ulysses.
Something that came in mind for me was I also talked a little bit about this with one of the people on the field trip about the parkways, how I liked how, well, today especially kind of reminded me of how a lot of parkways, like, I guess can be an intervention, although a lot of people don't see it as that. Like, there's a lot of opportunity there for a lot of native plant introduction, or also like edible garden like sort of systems that can be introduced, which I think is what came to mind to me, at least.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that. Let's go to you, Jocelyn.
Hi, sorry. Can I get the question repeated again?
Yeah, no worries. So the question is, given the readings that we've been going over and the speakers that we've heard from, what are some landscape design interventions you're considering for the field trips you visited? Either the one for our course by having attended the field trip or watching the video that was posted, or thinking of another class field trip, right? What are some design interventions that are coming to mind based off of what you've been learning in this class?
Based off what I've been learning in this class, well, I didn't get to go to our field trip because I had another one for my studio class. And I guess I could base this question off that field trip. We went to, I don't know how to pronounce the word, but it was in LA, and we did a forest bathing exercise. And I guess one of the interventions I could think of, when it comes to, I could say like where I live, I think that there's not enough, I guess, not green, but sustainable planting, if that makes sense. So planting that's good for the environment, that won't, I guess, cause more drought. So I can for sure say that from this class, I'm learning about ways to prevent that. Sorry, you're
I
muted.
think you're muted.
Thank you. It always happens. But what are one of the things that you would introduce to address drought?
One of the things that I would introduce are, well, of course, planting the plants that don't require a lot of water and that are good in, the soil wherever my site may be. I also wanted to add, I really liked your point about being smart about like vegetable gardens and things that you're going to eat, because I feel like when it does come to design, I don't take that into consideration and how healthy the soil is and where it has where it's been before. So that too.
That's a really big point, and it is critical depending on where you are, right? Because let's say if you're in the valley, there's some really good fertile soil in the valley, right? Some really great, just drop the seed where you're at and it'll be good to go. But in communities like South LA that have a lot of toxic soil, you have to mitigate that component with above bed gardening, especially if you anticipate eating what is being grown. So yes, that's a good point. Thank you for uplifting that, Jocelyn. Let's go to you, Naui.
So one thing that I remember sticking to me from the field trip was they talked about the seeding of the black walnut, and because of like the intense heat, the region saw within the last year that they ended up seeding a lot earlier than they should have. And they talked a little bit about how that could affect the propagation and the growing of those seeds, because they don't last very long in the soil. So I guess one of the more I guess one of like the design interventions that I kind of thought about was in regards to like invasive species, because they talked about the black mustard and how with the little bit of water that's available in that area, that the black mustard tends to hog all of it up. And not only addressing like the invasive species, but also utilizing more bioswales to funnel water where it's most needed towards the native plants.
That's a big one. I appreciate you uplifting that, Naui. One, the invasive species, right? It takes all of the water that's available. But the intervention you propose in regards to increasing the bioswales, that's a really awesome option, right? There's some really great ways that you can slow the movement of water down on site to increase the way it can enhance life on site, specifically for the black walnut. If we're talking about Ascot Hills, and like you mentioned, addressing that black mustard is super critical to sustain life, specifically for the walnut tree. Thank you for sharing that, now. Let's go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think it was also worth mentioning too that using more shading techniques would also be beneficial for any site because it can help with water retention, especially if you're planting I don't know, shrubs or trees with a large expanse or they're able to shade a lot of area around them
Mhm.
to
This
help
is
with
true.
water retention.
This is true. That that ground cover and that shading is super critical for that. Let's go to you, Paige.
Hi. I wasn't able to go on the field trip, but it's just something that like I've noticed that it just feels like there aren't enough, like not only like natives, but like I feel like it's like environmental equity that's really being taken into consideration, especially like with, you know, our I get kind of frustrated because I feel like a lot of like homeowners and residences are being pushed to like save water, but like really it's like most of the water in California is going to like agriculture and like, you know, the central area. And it's like no one really questioned that because, you know, the amount of money that's being funneled through that, you know, to policymakers and everything. But I mean, just being able to take a stance on that ourselves, like, you know, being able to make better water management practices, you know, I think that's really important and something that we should be considering, you know, other than you know, just making like a therapeutic garden, everything like that, like taking into account like restoration for the environment, other like
Mhm.
not just, you know, us as humans is important too. And I really
I
like how oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I really liked in her slideshow how she like features signage because education is really, really important for like the general public, you know, who might not have had like the background, you know, that we have, you know, and like for them to like realize that drought tolerant landscapes or water wise gardens isn't just like for the desert and it doesn't have to look like barren and destitute, you know, it could be thriving and full of life. And yeah, I really appreciated that she was able to do that as well as like foster a sense of community with like in her own, you know, front porch, which is awesome.
Mhm. I appreciate what you have lifted, Paige. One, I feel with calling out policy, you're bringing up, you know, some of these considerations that come up when we're deciding what type of design intervention we want to introduce. And I appreciate you uplifting the policy. What I have a question to follow up with that is, what do you think a policy solution would be, specifically around water? And you don't have to like come up with like policy language right now, right? But like, what would be a solution to what you are seeing as a challenge?
I mean, in regards to like our drought situation or
Yeah, one of the things that I heard you mention, you talked about the disconnect from how people understand the water crisis and who's, let's say, the cause of it, right? So what is an intervention to address the mass water waste and water usage of agriculture? It sounds like you called out.
yeah.
So like, what would you think a solution would be to address that?
I mean, rewriting the water laws first and foremost, because I think they haven't been updated for decades since, you know, and especially Central California, particularly like whoever like there, I mean, there's like like a million almond farms there basically. And this like one mega company like owned by the Resnicks, they're just like the way the water laws are written, it's like wherever your property is over you know, like a water table, like if it's the deepest part, you're allowed to suck as much as you want. And like they're also like they're just buying out neighboring farms, or they've even tapped into I think like one of like a public water pipe that comes down to LA, and it's like, you know, there's not really anyone regulating it. And I think rewriting those laws, you know, could definitely help kind of bring some more equity with our resources and like allow, you know, a light to be shined on what's happening over there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really awesome example. And I appreciate you pushing this conversation around policy components related to landscape architecture. Daniel, let's go to you and then we'll go to Vivian.
One issue I was thinking about was shade. So there was like, I went to a site visit in San Diego at the Japanese Friendship Garden for a studio field trip. And what I noticed was that they had, there was areas that had lots of shade. And the result of that was like human scale trees, almost like bringing the scale of these trees down. So the canopy is almost intimate and the sun doesn't penetrate as much through these like groupings. So I was thinking like living where I am, there's a lot of heat islands. And so a way to tackle that would kind of, it doesn't necessarily, you don't need a big, huge tree that can take up a lot of water. You can use smaller scale type of trees that have like a small canopy and it can still provide that amount of shade as opposed to using like for a bus stop, instead of using a structure, you can use a landscape to build that shade and kind of that cooling throughout the city.
Nice. Shading is super critical, and that definitely sounds like a great solution to look into. Thanks for sharing that, Daniel. We'll go to Vivian, and after that, we'll go to Ryan, and then Catherine.
I think that having edible and like edible plants incorporated into like sidewalk medians is also a good landscape intervention to address food insecurity in some neighborhoods, because like, and also it could also like address other topics like shade canopy with like fruit trees like lemon trees or like guava trees, instead of like having just like your normal like oaks and walnuts.
That's awesome, and I'm sure everybody would be happy with a guava tree. I remember growing up, one of my neighbors used to grow guava, and it was really awesome when they were in season to just snatch one off the tree and just go at it. And then you can always love those neighbors that have the lemon trees. You go take the lemons and make lemonade. That was always great. So yeah, having those in the right of way, that's going to be really awesome, a great opportunity there. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. And then after that, we know we're gonna go to Catherine. We'll go to Hermilio and then Giselle.
Something I noticed, like just walking around places, is that there's a lack of seating outside of anything that's like a business's purview. And more so if whether or not it's shaded. Essentially just seating in shaded areas is something that should be a priority.
I totally agree with that. I appreciate you uplifting that, Ryan, because seating is a very important feature in a landscape, but oftentimes we're thinking of landscape related to green space, which is a big component, right? We definitely want to reclaim green space, but what are some of the features can we include within a landscape that will make it easier to access, and so on and so forth? So I really appreciate you uplifting that, Ryan. You said seating as well as shading. Both of those are really, really important. And seating so far is the first non-environmental intervention. So I appreciate you introducing that, Ryan. Let's go to Catherine. Then it's Hermilio.
All right, so I think actually two came to mind after hearing our speaker's presentation. I wanted to look at the animals plus nature, maybe as a design intervention, and how some designs like promote animals and some may restrict animals. But then I think a design intervention that I've found within the field trips that I've been on, I went to the Bridge Street projects in LA, and they had a lookout view, like a little hole almost in the bridge where you can look down and you can see nature. But I felt like a lot of people used it to litter. And I feel like that's the first time that I noticed that. And I think it's a really interesting thing to look at, especially with the design principle of just like trying to produce no waste. And I guess thinking about ways that it could be better would maybe be some signage to like talk about the different like plants that you may be looking down, instead of people just thinking it's like an open cutout hole in the bridge.
Signage is super critical, and that's a great intervention as well, just to really name things in sight to help people understand how to associate the relationship to it. So that's a powerful intervention, and another great one that isn't necessarily environmental centered, but it's a byproduct of trying to be mindful of environment considerations, right? How do we make people mindful? Some of that is going to be signage. So that's a great intervention. Thanks for sharing that. Hermelio, and then we'll go to Giselle.
Yes, one of my design intervention is that what I observe when we visit to the park. The park is doing great that they bring those native plants. The problem is that when they're small, they will need to supply some water, which is great to do that because they don't need much water after they're established. What my thought is, if there is a way that we can create a kind of a crater or something on the top of the hill, of the mountain, and try to collect the water right there, because what it is right now, unless I didn't observe carefully, but I believe when rain, all the water just goes down. Nothing holds on top. And then that would be one way to slowly the water would go down the hill, and the native plants might take advantage on it. Yeah, maybe the problem would be the budget, because to do something like that, maybe it's very expensive. But if we want to improve the park and conserve our park, this is my main concern is we need to find a way how to, I don't know, hold the water or maybe create, but we can't really create water. So that's just a thought, and that's my.
I like that, Hermelo. I really do. I think that that's a great idea. Similar to the bioswale option, it sounds like you are referring to more of like an above water or above bed cistern, something that can capture water, like I think, what was that? It was I think it was the rain capture cistern that Brandy had, but it may be one on a bigger scale. It sounds like an option for that, or it may be sounding like you would say add a bioswale to the top of the hill as well. So that's how I understand that water capture component, but I don't totally agree with that. And I think that's a dynamic intervention option.
Yes, I think it probably is a bioswale, but because we can also take advantage if we create this little small crater on the top, and then we can have some plants around, of course. And then slowly, I don't know, the water slowly would go down, or the soil would, I don't know, take it in. And then this water goes down the hill slowly, rather than once rain in 1 second just went all the way to the bottom. And nothing holds on the top. So my concern always is water. I don't know why I love water. I like water so much. I got very excited with the little creek that we saw in the park. And I hope I forgot the name of the person that was explaining on in charge that day.
Gama and Jose.
Well, yeah, I hope he would, thank you. I hope he take my idea that they can create something and hold the water that is running, because the water is going somewhere and it's just wasting water right there.
No, that's a good point. We'll go to Giselle, and for the sake of time, I'm gonna ask everyone else to put their intervention in the chat, and so that way we can move on with today. And I want to make sure we have enough time to go over the midterm.
So a landscape intervention I've been looking into is accessibility, mainly because the few times I've gone out to like downtown LA and stuff like that with my wheelchair bound friend, I've just noticed that the paths are either really narrow or just really cracked, and we've had to fight with her wheelchair and just trying to move through the pavement, and just it's been a real mess. So I'm kind of looking towards seeing how we can fix that, or just finding other materials maybe for specific paths and just create a more accessible place.
That is super important. I'm glad that we're closing on that note. And everybody else, again, just put your interventions in the chat. But we will be talking about accessibility next week. I'm super excited about that lecture because you all should have, well, you probably have completed or be finishing it shortly, the documentary and the write-up, the reading for designing for accessibility. And that's a really big component as far as landscape, because a lot of times we don't think about accessibility in the like natural landscape. And so there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I appreciate you uplifting that, Giselle. Thank you. All right, thank y'all so much for sharing those interventions. Definitely be keeping those interventions front of mind, because we're moving closer and closer to identifying what our intervention is going to be for your final. Okay, so be mindful of that. Before we go into our midterm assignment review, I want to have an opportunity to introduce y'all to the writer of this book. Raise your hand if you got this book already.
I think mine's gonna come in next week.
It's
They
gonna
got
come
like
in.
back
Still
orders
waiting for mine to
back.
come in as well.
Yeah, mine took a long time to come, so I had to, yeah, it was a struggle, but it's here. Look at y'all, it's in the flesh. I finally got it. I'm happy, and I'm excited about this for real, y'all, because one, it's important to, I feel, expose y'all to architects of color. This book is written in Chinese, so y'all have to learn Mandarin before you read it. I'm joking. It's in both Mandarin and English, but I think it's really cool to kind of have that juxtaposed kind of component with this, because again, Kong Jingyu is really a dynamic architect, landscape architect, and a lot of the prototypes that you'll be introduced in this book, I feel, will be really key in supporting you all as you think through prototyping your sites. In this course, you'll only have to conceptualize your site. You will have to do a site precedent and a site analysis, but you won't have to complete a full design. I do want you to complete concepts, right? Some rough design concept, prototyping in written format. But if you do some really cool sketches of your design, you'll have to write less for your final. But this book and this, I'm giving you more time to complete the assignment that should be due today. So just turn it in as soon as possible. But this book is really, really cool. Okay. Really, really soak in the knowledge of this gentleman. And without that, with that being in mind, there's a concept of spun cities that was introduced by Kong Jingyu. And I think it's a really critical component that I want you all to think about as you all develop your landscape intervention. One is scalability. We talked about residential sites today. A lot of times you think resident sites could be small, and a lot of times they are small, but like think about the scale of residents if you can get all residents within a region to have a certain model of landscaping, right? Or think about how we can reclaim residential spaces, whether it's streets and so on and so forth, introducing permeable pavement, reclaiming green space, revitalizing the river like the LA River Project. So I want you all to be thinking about that as we listen to Kong Jingyu. But before that, I want to go to Joshua. I see your hand.
Oh, sorry, it was just for the book that I got. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Wait, I haven't got the book.
Get it
I was
as soon as
wondering.
possible.
So is the assignment gonna be due for that book next week, or?
It's due as soon as possible. Reach out to me if you cannot do it by next week. Like, I don't know what everybody's situation is as far as getting the book, but I know this is the only book so far that we haven't had to purchase, you know, like that wasn't available online as an option. So yeah, there was some challenges with me getting the book personally. So I can imagine if you all had challenges getting it as well. I want you all to get the book, right? And I want you to complete the assignment. So with that being said, that assignment is going to be really important, right? Because it's going to help you think through your final. Your final will be a proposal for your landscape intervention, and like including all of the things that we've learned this year, right? About the constraints, the considerations, stakeholder, collective impact, right? Permaculture design, all of those components you want to speak to in your proposal. I want to be able to read your proposals for your landscape intervention, have an understanding of your site, have an understanding on what you feel is important to the site's needs and what your proposed intervention is. And we'll talk about that. But right now, let's listen to this video.
Oh, we can't hear it.
We can't hear anything, Professor.
Yeah, we can't hear anything.
But we
Can you hear
advisors have
something
always
now?
felt that as incredibly important as it is
Yeah.
to resist
Okay, let me
Yeah,
see.
it's working.
policies
Okay,
and
perfect.
oppression, it's equally important to highlight potential solutions, to showcase projects and initiatives that reveal what a truly equitable, sane, and nature-honoring society would look like. And there are remarkable people all around the world doing incredible projects. So we have to keep hope alive. We have to hope that a pandemic of sanity will break out at some point and that these alternative templates will be available to be emulated and implemented. But unfortunately, so far at least, as brilliant as many of these projects are, none of them, or not none of them, but very few of them on a sufficiently vast scale to effectively counteract the incredible destruction that our current economic system inflicts upon the earth. And that's why it's especially exciting when one encounters projects that aren't just inspiring for their values and their vision, but that are actually built and are on a large enough scale to actually have a major impact. And so I haven't been as thrilled in a long time as when I encountered the work of our next presenter. Professor Kong Jian-Yu is a major global figure in ecological urbanism and landscape architecture. He founded the College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at Peking University, and also a very influential design firm, Terrenscape, based in Beijing. And Professor Yu has become world renowned for his sponge cities and for a number of other nature-based climate adaptation strategies. And his approach to urban planning has been implemented in 200 cities in China, over 200 cities, and beyond China. And what impresses me the most about Professor Yu's work, there are several things. The first is, as I mentioned, they're very ambitious scale, and you're going to get a stunning visual tour of some of those projects. You'll see what I'm talking about. The second is the fact that they're highly effective at preventing flooding and therefore at saving a number of lives. The third is the fact that he's drawing from ancient Chinese water management systems rooted in Taoist and Confucian principles, but combined with cutting edge modern design science, hydrology, and botany. And last, but certainly not least, is the staggering beauty of many of his creations. What I find in Professor Yu's work an ideal marriage of ancient wisdom and modern science, a deep honoring of humanity's embeddedness in nature, and a sublime aesthetic sensibility. It's almost enough to give me an inkling of hope in the survivability of the human enterprise. Professor Yu could not be with us today. It's very hard to travel from China here at the moment, but he very graciously agreed to produce a video just for us. And it's my great honor to be able to offer it to you now. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kong Jian Yu from Beijing University and Trunscape. It is my great honor to share with you my thinking and practice of Sponge City. To build a Sponge City is to embrace nature once again, to honor and celebrate the beauty and ever-changing rhythms of natural life. Naturally flowing rivers follow the cycle of the seasons, rejuvenating floodplains and providing abundant habitat for myriad kinds of life. But the concrete cities can disrupt this balance. Dams and flood walls are often built to withstand 500 and even 1,000-year floods. This hardened infrastructure destroys ecologically valuable wetlands and the habitat that wildlife relies on to survive. Drainage systems not only are designed to rapidly move rainwater out of the cities, but they also have little capacity to handle significant changes in precipitation patterns, like those driven by climate change. Moreover, they come at a massive cost. Not only that, but the runoff increases the nutrient load in natural water bodies, causing serious eutrophication problems. China has less than 7% of the world's total water resources, and the larger expenses of concrete and other impermeable surfaces prevent rainfall from soaking into the ground. Because of that, the aquifer under the North China Plain is declining by a meter per year. Cities like that are like a person dependent on life support. The treatment is expensive and the prospects of real recovery are slim. Past urban construction practices have wasted large amounts of material and water resources and gotten us little closer to a sustainable way of life. Of the 600 largest cities in China, 400 face water shortages. But there's another way. For more than 2 decades, I have been focused on recovering the natural water regulating capacity of the land and designing sponge cities, which rely purely on natural process to retain water, slow down the flow, and clean water. Since 1998, my team at the Beijing University and Trunscape has worked in some of the most badly abused landscapes, including industrial dumping grounds and river channels strangled with concrete. To reopen a path for water, clean the soil, and restore wetland habitat. Each project is another step forward in making the argument that we must finally embrace floods as an ecologically beneficial force, recognize a symbiosis between the built landscape and water, and allow nature to do the work upon which we all depend for survival. The sponge city concept takes a nature-based light touch approach that focuses on allowing precipitation to slowly flow through a series of ecological filtration terraces and ponds. These abundant green sponges provide a rich habitat for native plants and give wildlife a chance to come home. Compared with gray infrastructure, the sponge city approach offers a far gentler way to deal with floods. We use geographical information system to identify ecologically critical lines and steer development away from the 1,000-year floodplain. Wetland parks are built in areas occasionally inundated by floods during the flood season, the city won't be affected. And the rest of the year, the natural wetlands serve as natural water filters. Specially designed sponge can also absorb excess nutrient loads and help restore the natural water cycle, nourishing the land and the native plants and animals, and giving local residents a new way to connect with nature in the heart of the concrete jungle. more than ever, we have to rethink the way we build our cities, the way we treat water and nature, and even the way we define civilization. Sponge city or sponge planet is a holistic and a nature-based solution to protect and restore ecological infrastructure and make wise use of nature's free surfaces for the benefit of the planet and the welfare of people. Thank you.
That's an amazing designer, creator, thinker, right? And that's who we're going to be learning prototyping from this semester. So I'm excited for you all to dig into that reading. But with that being said, I think that this is a perfect transition into our midterm review. So for your midterm assignment, you have to complete the narrative canvas, the research framework, identify the proposed landscape intervention you have, identify case studies and design precedents for landscape intervention, identify class assigned readings and relevant research you will use for your final. And then so you'll be preparing a Spark Note with these details, right? So these Spark Notes is going to be a little more than what we've usually done, but I think based off of all of the stuff you need to represent, this should be a nice amount of pages for you to accomplish these tasks. So I'm gonna stop sharing this so I could share another screen. But let's see, boom. Exit out of here, go to the midterm study guide. All right, so you all should have the study guide for the midterm. The goal is to apply narrative strategy, permaculture design principles, and collective impact approaches to prototype a landscape intervention and a report proposal. That's going to be the goal for this. And you all really right now are collecting the information. You're not doing too much explaining per se. It's more of like identifying these components. So what you're being asked to do is identify the type of sites you want to work on. So the different sites we've learned about are residential landscape site, natural landscape site, cosmopolitan canopy site, or contested site. And then public health and accessibility, this is just a really big component of considerations. But these are the type of sites: residential, natural landscape, or contested economic site, right? So as far as the ones we visited, you've done a walkthrough of residential. We've had a speaker come in and talk about residential sites, and we've had some great examples of residential sites. We've also seen on our Ascot Hills field trip, a natural open landscape site, learned about the way that the site is being rehabbed, some of the challenges it has with invasive species, as well as some of the socio-economic and political challenges it has as well. The goal is to go to at least one more field trip. I'm trying to figure out what these dates are. I haven't been able to confirm them, and I don't want to do it too late into November. So if we don't get this confirmed by November for some field trips by the mid-November, then we're gonna have to figure that out. But I am in conversation right now with Inclusive Action for the contested street vendors landscape. And I finally got conversation back from LA Mission, which I had given up on. I also was able to speak to Moon Water Farms. And so we have an option to go to Moon Water Farms. So I want to push it back out to you all. I want to be mindful of capacity, where we're at in the semester. Again, the goal would be to go by the end of October. So that last weekend of October, a Halloween weekend, Friday or Saturday that weekend, if I can get one of these works to confirm. Right now, Moon Water Farms is tentatively scheduled for Friday, November 4th. So that's an option, but I have to get confirmation from Inclusive Action and LA Mission, which is Homeless Supported Services. So we doing a site visit to Skid Row. Put in the chat, and I will look at it later, which site you all want to go to, and I will go ahead and rank the options based off of the responses we get from that. So again, we have LA Mission Skid Row site visit, Moon Water Farm site visit, Inclusive Action Street Vendor site visit. So I'll move on. When in your presentation, you will have to identify a design precedent examples. So you don't have to develop a design precedent. You will do that later. You will have that assignment. But right now, I just want you to find an example of a design that connects to what you feel is on par with what you believe. So this is the American Society for Landscape Architect site. It has so many great projects that can give you insight on, let's say, an intervention you want to do. And they have all of these different details about these initiatives. And so you could find inspiration from these. But I want you to identify one and say why you chose it. Right? All of these different options. So you go on this site, it's in the midterm study guide, and you can find that. So these are some of the interventions you want to think about, okay? Socio-environmental, it's a lot here for that. You should have at least one socio-environmental intervention, and then I want you to connect it to a socio-political intervention or a socio-economic intervention. So you have your socio-environmental component, and you have to choose between socio-political, socio-economic. That's what you'll highlight, right? As far as your consideration. If you choose socio-political, you want to identify your stakeholders relevant to the intervention. Is it the resident? Is it community-based organizations? We've had examples of these, right? You've done community walkthroughs in your community, so you were able to see different stakeholders in that space. Excuse me. We went to Ascot Hills. We spoke with Gama, who was with Northeast Hills, but he's also a part of another community-based organization that does political organizing. You all are students, so you can speak to this student school component. We've talked about developers, right? You can do research and identify different developers and what their focus or interests are. And then we've also talked a lot about government elected components in regards to stakeholders. So identifying, like, let's say, who led a bill or who wrote a bill, who's leading an initiative. So how do you do this research, right? These are examples of different research considerations, like what policies are informing the socio-political considerations for your intervention. What community-led reports are you referencing to understand the community's vision, and what government reports are informing your understanding of what the government is looking for. So this study guide provides some examples, but don't feel limited to these examples. If you are, using references of your own, you definitely can do that as well. But these are to really help you get your mind thinking. Is also provide some examples that we've gone over or had access to during this class. Socioeconomic, similar process, right? You want to do the research, identify the stakeholders, but you want to identify how you can develop a feature for the site that increases local economy. For example, like street vendors, right? Align the local transit, retail, or park networks to the site. So really similar to the example of like building concepts, is there a waterway that the site is connected to? Is there a school district that this site is connected to? And so it could be centered in relation to what's in proximity of site, in relation to different components in the ecosystem that the site could be a part of the conversation of. So with that said, I want to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you all have about the midterm. You have the goals that is set for what you need to respond to. Let me go to the rubric. So when we're talking about the rubric, I'm looking for you all to have some meaningful responses to each of these sections to really show that you really process what we've been learning in this class around these concepts like narrative canvas, using the narrative canvas, identifying permaculture design principles, identifying policy windows, identifying stakeholders and champions and adversaries, right? So we've discussed a lot of these things. We've talked about hero, villain, and victim framing. So now it's about how do you apply this to your reading of site? How do you apply this to your identification of a design intervention, right? So we're gonna look on the exemplary side because all of you are gonna do an exemplary job. Students recognize potential constraints and identify clear stakeholder alignment. If it's around identifies appropriate data and assign reading citations, I do want you to take this opportunity to pull the readings that you feel most resonated with you and identify more than 5 or more class readings and 5 or more self-source readings. So some of you all have already incorporated your personal readings into your project responses. So in addition to the reading assignments, I've provided you, I want you to cite at least 5 of them. As far as like, these are the ones that have resonated with me. And then 5 self-source ones that, let's say, this class influenced you to like influence you to see, or because of this class, you're like, oh wow, this book means that much more to me, or I have a better understanding on this book. And bring those in. You all again have used books that have resonated with some of the readings that you have done and included some of those reflections into the reading. So just be mindful of that. This is an opportunity for you again to incorporate other reading into your project responses. So complete design research framework. So you all are familiar with that framework. It's really about having a response for each of those components. Exemplary completion of the design research framework, right? You want to go through all of the components of it and respond to each section. Identifies case study and design precedent for chosen site. So again, were you able to identify a case study or design precedent that reflects how, that reflects the needs of the site that you're actually doing research on? And does it connect to the design intervention that you identify? And lastly, identify proposed design intervention. Exemplary evidence of proposed design intervention, excuse me, that identifies alignment with stakeholders' needs and interests, environmental needs and interests, as well as political or economic component. So this is your rubric. You also have the midterm study guide. Again, the goal is to identify these components because when you come around to your final is going to be a write-up. You're gonna have to have like a thoughtful writing assignment on all of the things that you learned. And so this is an opportunity for you to basically collect all of the things that you'll eventually write about. It's an opportunity for you to collect some of the things that you'll use to develop your design precedent and site analysis. But right now, I want you to just develop an Adobe Express or PowerPoint of all of these components that we've learned so far in this class. And that's going to really propel you forward to submit an amazing final with all of the bells and whistles. So with that being said, I want to stop sharing my screen and face you all for any questions that you all have, any concerns you all have with completing the midterm.
Probably just two things. So, first might be like in terms of like the deliverables. So, and like, so you want to like turn it as like the 25 slide PDF presentation with like, well, of course, filling out like all the components with what's there in the like the study guide. And second one too is like in terms of like the sources too that we collect for our research. Like, do you think we could also pull up like outside articles or like other books that might have influenced this research?
Yeah, so 5 from the class and then at least 5 from outside.
Okay.
That's exemplary.
Okay.
So that's 10 sources that you want to have identified for your midterm. And then your final, you'll be writing, incorporating those citations into your final. Any concerns, any questions, any excitement? Give me some celebrations, some claps if y'all excited about the midterm.
No, I'm not.
I had a question. What if so it's like you get 10 sources and then you have to use them right for the final?
Yes.
What if one source or two just turn out to be like not like use? Can we just use alternative ones?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
totally fine, right? I imagine my hope, and this is my hope. My hope is that your midterm doesn't change too much from your final, but it may, right? Depending on, like, let's say if we go to one of these field trips and it's post midterm submission and you're like, ooh, I want to do it on this now, you would have to tweak some of the components of your midterm. So that's why I gave all of your options right now. So you can kind of be thinking ahead, even if we haven't visited a site like that. And then you also have the option to identify site precedents that reflect that. And then so let's say if you go to, like, if your vision is to do the street vendor site, and once we go there, you can take site pictures and have a better understanding of site once we do the field trip, but start building your midterm around that final project, if that makes sense. Hermilo, I saw that you came off of mute.
My question is, the proposal, do I need to write the paper to somebody, or I don't understand how to do the proposal?
That's a good question. So right now you're not having to do that right now per se, but you can start thinking about your stakeholders, right? You're identifying the stakeholders, and your final, you'll be more specific into the stakeholder you're writing to. And then that'll help you kind of spell out, your economic considerations or your policy considerations. Right now, you're just writing those things out in regards to their face value, not their details.
Oh, I see.
Does that help?
Yeah, because yeah, I think that was my main concern, because I didn't know if I'm going to talk about some site, if I am proposing something, well, I'm going to propose, but to who? That was a little bit.
Right now, you're building your outline. So you're just identifying all of these components, and then your final will be your proposal, which is a write-up of that. And so between now and the final, we'll be going through collective impact. And so you'll learn how to engage different stakeholders. You'll learn how to do some of those components that you'll eventually be able to spell out in your final. But right now, your goal is to, with the information you've learned so far, is to identify all stakeholders that you think are relevant to site. In your final, you'll be more specific on what stakeholder you're focusing on. But right now, you want to be more general in your understanding of what stakeholders exist, period.
I got it. I think I got it. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go back to the presentation. And this goes to the frameworks, right? And so the screen one, I wanted to lower the full screen. Okay. So this roadmap, this is not, okay, so this roadmap right here, right? You are leveraging narrative strategy to identify barriers and opportunities in existing system, investigate challenges and solutions, or challenges and successes present in target design area, develop solutions that connect the dots between barriers and opportunities, right? And then that's used to inform decision makers, or in your case, different stakeholders around the different design interventions that you're proposing. And so your design interventions need to be aligned to stakeholders' interests. So when you submit your final, you'll be able to communicate to what stakeholders' interests you're talking to in your proposal. But right now, you're identifying all solutions, you're identifying all stakeholders, right? You're just getting a lay of the land. You're doing the landscape analysis right now, not landscape design, but the landscape analysis, right? But eventually that information is going to be used to develop your proposal. And this is the roadmap that you're following, but specific to design, right? Now going here, this is your research. You're IDing site and regional design constraints and challenges. That's what you're doing right now. You're identifying the design constraint, policy constraints, economic constraints, and socio-political, environmental, economic considerations. All of that goes into your proposed design intervention. That's what we've been learning this semester. So at the end of this midterm, you're going to have a list of design interventions that you're proposing for this site that you chose. Okay. You don't want to specify the one that you'll do your proposal on yet. You want to think about all of the potential interventions that could potentially be done. Okay. That's what the midterm is doing. This should be a PowerPoint with just all of the details of these things. And your final, you'll be writing the details out and explaining the narrative behind the details. Right now, you're just getting the outline of all the details, all the information that you're going to be considering using the design research strategy, identifying the socio-political, socio-economic, and socio-environmental considerations, and then conducting the stakeholder research. And this right here is your canvas. You'll be able to understand, again, the design interventions that you're proposing, the solutions that it's addressing. You'll develop that narrative component, what conflicts are identified, what characters are identified, what permaculture design principles are represented on that site or missing. Landscape mapping, right? Who is the target demographics that will benefit from your design interventions that you're proposing? Who are the adversaries that will be up against some of the design interventions that you're proposing? Who are the champions? Who wants this to happen? Who will support you? What are the existing systems? What are the existing policies, local policies that inform how the site exists now? Are there any constraints that you need to be mindful of in relation to your site, right? So again, the canvas and the research, you want to complete these 2 frames, and that's going to really inform your midterm. I really appreciated Nawi's comment in the chat. It's awesome to see how fast nature regenerates and bounces back. And I believe that was in response to the video with Gong Jing Yu. And I totally agree with that. That video is really a lot of before and after pictures, but it was so dynamic to see that I was like, yeah, we're gonna watch this whole thing because one, I really think it cements the reason why I think this book is so important, right? Like the skill that he's able to develop landscape spun cities on is unmatched, right? Like in the outcome of some of the ways that he was able to introduce those things is just really, I think, would be regional, would impact our region drastically, right? If we can incorporate some of the flooding plains that were developed to make water, slow down water and clean water in the city, and seeing the dynamic shift in landscape as a result of his landscape interventions, it really is getting excited to see the projects that you all come with, especially given that we're using his book to understand prototyping landscapes. I want to read some of the interventions that were in the chat. Joshua put, not sure it's an intervention, but really one important aspect for landscape designers is just community involvement. After watching Crip Camp and my site analysis on Super Killing Park, that kind of wasted some space for things that they did little research on. No, that's a big component. I think community involvement is critical, and oftentimes it's an underutilized component to understand what considerations need to be made for your concept build. The video we watched at the beginning talked about that, right? Just really checking in with the client. And the community is always a client. I always say the people, the environment, and the landscape are always present. So you know your first clients outside of the one that's paying you are the community and the environment. No matter what, those 2 components are going to be there. So thanks for sharing that. Steve puts, landscape intervention, land trust policy. Publicly elected nonprofit groups can have sites that will improve the community. That is big. That is really, really big. There are a lot of land trust initiatives. I'm actually writing a podcast right now to highlight some of the work that's being done with land trust organizations as a way to organize land use policy, right? And to reclaim land. So I really appreciate that as an option. And it's a non-environmental intervention, which I appreciate. It's a policy intervention. Linda, is the LAF 046, I couldn't see with the background. Yes, that is that book. That it was, the background was messing it all up. It really was. Chris puts landscape intervention, biodiversity and plants and wildlife with water retention and proper shading, like others said. There would be much more opportunity for diversifying the plant life and creating natural habitats for wildlife. Another intervention I got from Ascot Hills was that the only seating was at the start of the trail, but having benches, viewpoints, and man-made shade will add to the social aspect and learning experiences of the park. Totally agree with that. Edgar, landscape intervention through education. In my experience working in residential landscaping, I have found it rewarding to educate people about the importance of preservation and restoration, and through regenerative gardens to enhance and embrace our local climate and microclimates. Teach about our Mediterranean climate and the plants that are more adequate for our zones that make sense to plant and work well through the seasons over time. And that support pollinators as well. Soil viability and protection through mulching, and maybe working with establishing or working with community gardens to educate and involve our community, create a hands-on and sensory experience for all people. very, very amazing interventions. One of the things that was brought up with Brandy, which I really appreciate, was just uplifting that we live in a Mediterranean climate. A lot of times we like to say we're in a desert, and some of it is desert, right? Depending on where you are in the Southern California region. But we as landscape architects, probably like as landscape architects and designers, are leading a lot of these conversations around what climate do we live in. So we want to make sure that we're accurate on that, and that we are responsive to the landscape needs in consideration of that. So that's a good point. I really appreciated the conversation around perennials. I love perennials, like plants that are you know, active throughout the year. And I think that is something to be considerate of. And then the different cycles, even in the video that we watched with Kung Jin Yu's concepts, I really appreciated the shades of coloring that the site takes on throughout the year. And so when we're thinking about landscape, that is a component. And Brandy gave some really great examples of the different cycles of life and the beauty of those cycles. So thinking about that, I feel is going to be a critical component, and this speaks to that. And then also centering community as far as education and learning opportunities. So yeah, the last thing I want to mention before we get off is regarding your assignments. I have had the craziest week. I don't know if you all saw the LA Times article with the racist remarks that was done by the city council members, but that really threw my work week into a whirlwind. It has been a very interesting thing, responding to, like, having a personal processing of it, but also working for the city. It's been like front and center to like just responding to it professionally as well. And so that has taken a lot of my time up. So I do want to apologize for the post. I see some of you all did submit the assignments for the designing for accessibility, but that was supposed to be due next week on the 24th, not today. And Hermilo did email me about that. Thank you for telling me that, Hermila. My bad about that mispost. So you all do have another week. In regards to the assigned chapter readings for that, yeah, I need you all to email me, but instead of that, I'm just gonna assign you all right now. Daniel, you'll do one. Wait, who has already done it? Who's already completed designing for accessibility?
Steven.
So Jocelyn, Josh, Catherine. So I see 3 people. Steven, you said you did it too? Okay, so
Yes.
4 people have completed it. So what I'm going to do is have everyone who hasn't completed yet do a chapter and respond to that chapter the way that we respond to it, right? So Daniel, you'll do 1. Ryan, you'll do 2. Josh, did you say you did it already?
Yeah.
Edgar, did you do it?
No,
You'll do 3. Chris, you'll do 4. Jesus, you'll do 5.
I've completed already too.
Okay, great. Jesus, you'll do 4. Jocelyn, did you do it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. Ulysses, you'll do 5. Vivian, you'll do 6. Linda, you'll do 7. Paige, you'll do 8. Naui, 9. Carmelo, 10. Ricardo, 11.
I did it already.
Okay, Giselle, 11. Juan, 12.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You can The numbers that you gave is that chapter?
Yes, the chapter.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Does that sound good for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so my apologies again on that. That will be due on the 24th. Another thing I want you all to do is make sure that you all are participating by responding to the Padlet, right? I was really hoping you all would have caught up last week on our day off, but I don't think a lot of you have done that yet. So definitely be mindful to just respond to at least one every week. So you all are all behind because no one has done it yet, but I really want you all to do it because that's going to be a big part of your participation points. And so just be mindful that can probably help your grade, especially if you miss any assignments. So definitely do those things, please. Please, 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 please. And then that, again, because we are splitting the readings up, which I wanted to do to accommodate, you know, the workloads. I know you all are taking a lot of classes, but in order for that to make sense, I need you all to engage with each other's readings. Does that make sense? That way that you're getting what you didn't read in the other parts of the chapters. I did give you an extension on this reading as well for this book with Gongjing Yu. So definitely turn this in as soon as possible. It was due today, but I didn't have the book myself. So that I wanted to push it back, and then other folks. Can you see it? Sort of. It's this fun book. It has all the patterns. It's really cool. But it's a really great book. It's a really, really, really great book, and it's very informative. I really want you all to learn it. You all have the assigned readings for this one already. So definitely do your assigned readings, take it in, do your research on it, submit your assignments on Canvas as well as on Padlet so that we can learn from each other, and we'll be good to go. This is going to be a really big part of you building out your site analysis and your site precedent, as well as any sketches you come up for your site concepts. So definitely utilize it and make use of it. I won't keep y'all any longer. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stay on, and I'll be on for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I was just curious, do you know where I could find the Landscape Architecture Frontiers 046? I tried looking for it at the local library, but I think the book is too new for them to have it. Is that something I would have to order online?
Yes, this is probably one book out of the class that you will have to order. I saw it the cheapest at Walmart was like 31 bucks. They'll send it to you. I bought mine for 40 bucks. But I did try to keep the books below 50. This is 40 bucks. And I think all of the other books we are able to get online. So this should be the only book you have to purchase.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hey, I got a question based on grades. If what's on Canvas is our accurate grade, or that's not right.
Do you have, well, the only thing that should be issues with grades is if you have assignments you haven't turned in that aren't posted.
Okay.
Right? So if you've submitted assignments and for whatever reason they're not posted, definitely reach out to me. I do have a couple of the latest assignments I need to do, but if you're talking about the first 5 or 6 assignments, those should be posted with grades already. So definitely let me know if you're missing any grades.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, I have a question.
Yes.
The midterm. can I choose just any site? Like, for example, right here where I live? Because,
Yes, you
okay.
just have to identify it as residential, contested, or natural.
Oh, this is like, it's a complex.
So it'll be residential.
Oh, okay. So my understanding is I need to identify like all the problems that the site has. Is that I haven't
That's
looked.
aligned with what we've been learning in class, like socio environmental, socio political, socio economic considerations or constraints that would impact your design intervention.
Okay. All right. I think now it becomes even more clear for the midterm. All right. Well, when the midterm due?
I extended it. Y'all have a long time. Y'all have 14 days from today. So it's due on Halloween.
On Halloween. Nice. All right. If I have if I don't feel like a very confident the job that I've done, can I email to you like a draft and?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And get
Yes.
feedback that way. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome, Milo.